Hello, today I'm very excited because I'm going to have a bit of an experiment you can watch with me. I'm going to try some crackle paste on some watercolour paper. So this isn't something I've ever done before. This is the Aquarelle watercolour block that I'm going to be using. I love it because it's a very white paper and it's also glued around all the edges so that it doesn't matter how much moisture you put on it, it won't buckle. So the first thing I've done is actually just put out some lines with washi tape and just ruled some with pencil and then put the tape just where I want it, either side of that line, it doesn't really matter. This is just part of this experiment. I want to get a little bit of structure within this, but not too structured because I still want to have an abstract feel. You've got to squash it down quite firmly. And this is the Pebeo Studio Crackle Paste, and you put on a layer of this preparation sort of glue beforehand, quite a thick layer, so I've just brushed it on with a soft paintbrush and just in between the lines of washi tape that I want to use, because I want to have a few different areas of this texture. So I'm just doing the preparation here, and you put it on and then you have to leave it for at least an hour to dry. The next stage is to put on the crackle paste itself, which is very much like a texture paste, and literally put it over the preparation that you've put on. The thicker you do it, the larger the crackles, so it just depends how thickly you put it on. If you put it on areas where you haven't got the preparation stuff, it just basically acts as a texture paste. So smoothing it on with a knife, really useful, just to keep pulling it out and just get the layers. So here we are, after the crackle paste has now dried completely, and you can see all the lines that have appeared in it. It's a little bit fragile just around the edges, so what I've actually done, I've used some white acrylic paint and I've actually just put a layer across the whole page where the crackle paste is, just to fasten it down. Because I want to have a whitish base, so we're now good to go. So here we are. First of all, I'm just going to wet this area. I'm a little bit tentative actually here. This is just using Paynes grey acrylic paint, and I'm just brushing it on because the idea is that the paint will actually drop into the cracks that you've created. So I'm just seeing how tough this actually is to paint, and it's actually quite sturdy. It's a lot more sturdy than I thought it would be. So I'm going to go ahead and paint all of this panel with a coat of Paynes grey, and this is out of a tub. This is not an ink. We will be getting to the inks later on. And now I'm adding in one of my favourite colours. It's just burnt sienna, and again this is out of a tube, and I'm just mixing it in with this gorgeous Paynes grey, which is giving some lovely colours in between. So the brown and the grey mix together to make a sort of darker grey in places. And again, it's just a colour that I love. So I'm going to paint the whole of this panel with the burnt sienna. I'm pulling it across just to bridge those gaps between the two. It may stay, it may not. At this point, I'm just sort of playing about with it. This is very much an experiment, which I hope we'll all enjoy. And now this has dried, you can see the fantastic crackles that have appeared. And now I'm going to try another experiment. I'm actually using some masking fluid and a drawing pen, and I've actually drawn some stems and sort of loose seed heads onto the paper and across the crackle paste. I'm not entirely sure how it's going to work, but we'll see. This section here I'm going to just wet first of all. Nice clean fresh water with that soft brush, and then the exciting bit, I'm going to start adding in my favourite things, the acrylic inks. This is a Rowney Indigo, one of my favourite colours. I'm just going to spray it. Again, I'm happy if it drops in, fills into the cracks in between the crackle paste, and we'll just get it to move about into those cracks. And I've brushed it in, and now I've added a little bit of turquoise. Back with the burnt sienna and a little bit of a sort of brick red colour. You could use Indian red actually. And it's just making some really lovely colours. You can see the top of the left-hand side, I've also painted with the indigo blue as well. So we've got that little balance going on. And now I'm going in with a lovely, lovely sap green out of a tube, because I want to bring in a bit of a nature feel to this. So I'm just going to really wash this in, make it nice and loose, because this is the watercolour bit that's not got the crackle paste on. So we can do some fun things with that area. And again, in with that indigo, it ties in the theme with all the colours, and we can get that to move about. Okay, so I'm blending that in, just softening those edges. You can probably see where the masking fluid is. It's actually starting to appear. Not quite sure what I'm going to do with that right hand side yet, so I'm just going to pull that burnt sienna down and across, and we'll play with that later. A little bit of the brick red as well. And now on that other side of that crackle, bringing the green back in again, blending it with that blue and adding some more indigo. You can see how the two areas are going to balance in colour, but at the moment I'm still not sure where it's going to go. So that's coming together really nice. I like that. Just add a little bit more of that lovely sap green, and again blend it in with the blue. It's looking good so far, and especially now I get to add in my lovely, lovely burnt sienna ink again. It's just delicious. It reminds me of autumn and rusty things, but it's a vibrant colour. It's not a dowdy brown. It's beautiful. And we're mixing that in with those lovely colours there, and it'll start to make its own shades. So the next stage really is just adding in a little bit more depth. So again, I'm back in now with the Paynes grey and just taking that little bit in. We're just going to start building the layers of colour now. This is what makes it so interesting. We can add in darker areas, start to really emphasise the little bits of lighter stuff that we've got going on, and it gives it a grounding. Pulls it together but gives it the grounding. I want to keep that strip there of white just against the two areas of colour. And I'm also going to soften down some of this paint that we've put on. I love the vibrancy, but I don't want it to stand out. I want it to start to blend in with the green area that we've just created. So I'm just going across it with a little bit of titanium white, just softening it down. Various places that you can see I've applied on that blue, a little bit on that edge there. And now back in with the burnt sienna. Just lovely to build up these layers of colour, and so far the crackle paste is standing up to it really well, and the more paint I'm putting on, the more sturdy it will actually become. It's looking really good. We can see actually where the masking fluid is, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It's got some great areas of colour coming in and some brilliant texture. Okay, so I've just wet that area with some clean water, and I'm dropping in some turquoise again. And I don't want this to be that bright, so I'm just going to keep watering it down until I'm happy with the layers. It will soak into the crackles, so that's fine. And here we've got it moving nicely with some more water. Spread that out. Can always dab a little bit off if we don't want it there. Soften that out. As you can see, it's toned down quite nicely. But on this side I'm adding in some of the indigo ink, using my flat brush just to put a little bit depth at the bottom of that panel, just to give it a little bit more interest. Wash it in a little bit, soften that. And I'm going to do the same on the other side, but not quite as intensely. So again, it brings that balance across. What we've got on one side, we can include a little bit on the other side. And that mixes in really beautiful with that burnt sienna that we've softened. Now I'm using the palette knife just to drag across some of the Indian red. Catches on the crackles really nicely. And we can now remove the masking fluid because it's all dry. So I'm curious to see how this works. I know it'll work quite well on the paper, but I want to see how it does on the Crackle Paste. And as you can see, it has left lines, but not that white. But that's not a problem because we can go in later and pick it up with some of the white acrylic inks. But it has worked. I'm really pleased with that. I didn't know if it would do. And you can see the white seed heads now looking really interesting. So the white bits, I've actually just picked out a little bit of colour underneath just to highlight the white. We need the dark to make the white pop. So for this bit, I'm actually going to go in with the palette knife with a little bit of the paint on, and I'm just going to graze across the texture. If you've watched any of my other videos where I use a palette knife, it's something I do quite often. It adds colour to an area without it being too intense. So because it's grazing across, it just suggests a colour. If it's a little bit too heavy on your knife, just go into a flat area and just flatten it out a little bit until you're happy with it. And now I'm just going to go in and add a little bit more because it's starting to give that panel quite a lot more interest. So in between the colours, wipe it off on a piece of tissue. Now I'm going to go in with the lovely burnt sienna, and again it's just adding little bits of highlight and warmth to pick that up and make it interesting. Here I'm adding some gold to the whole area, and I'm just going to do a very thin line of it across under that area using the edge of my palette knife, just carefully picking it up from the tube, pulling it along. Takes a bit of a steady hand, but then I want to pull it down. And even though we haven't got texture paste on this area, because the paper has got a really nice rough tooth or texture to it, what you'll see when I graze down is it will leave it in, oh look at that, fabulous. The texture just by using the paint itself and the knife is just brilliant. And I've gone ahead and added the gold into different areas, and this is what we've got so far. This is looking really, really interesting. I love the textures. I'm really pleased with the colours, and I think it's worked very well for an experiment. Now, here I want to show you how to remove that page from the block. In the corner of one area, there is a loose bit where you can actually get a knife in, and I'm using a very sharp box cutter or Stanley knife, and you very gently just run it down the side of the block where it is glued. Try and keep the blade level so that you don't cut the paper, and you really just have to get to the end of each strip, turn the block round and do the same again. I was worried that the Crackle Paste might actually lift, but by doing it gently and very slowly, I've actually managed to remove the whole page from the block with no damage whatsoever. I am really, really pleased with how it's worked. And now here we are with it in a mount. It's looking really good. I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope it will inspire you to have a go. And please do stay in touch, subscribe, like and follow, and I will be back with some more interesting videos for you again soon. Many thanks for watching. Bye bye.